Donahue stood on the porch of his grandfather's Victorian home, perched on what locals called Sentinel Hill. The autumn wind carried the scent of pine and earth, the same scent that had greeted him every summer since he was 5. He ran his calloused hand along the wooden railing his grandfather had carved by hand, the same hands that had taught Maxwell everything from fixing engines to reading financial statements. "What would you think of all this, Grandpa Roy?" he muttered. 3 weeks had passed since Roy Donahue's funeral. The reading of the will had shocked everyone except Maxwell. While his cousins received cash distributions, Maxwell inherited the house and surrounding 40 acres. To the only one who understood what it meant, the will had stated, the property had been in the Donahue family for 4 generations. During the Depression, Maxwell's great-grandfather had saved it by working 3 jobs. His grandfather had preserved it through the mortgage crisis of the 2010s by living on canned beans and refusing to take on debt. The house wasn't just wood and nails. It was the physical manifestation of his family's resilience. Maxwell's phone buzzed. A text from his wife, Vivian. "Dinner at my parents' tonight. Don't forget." He sighed. The Hargrove family dinners were precisely choreographed affairs where his father-in-law, Theodore, held court while his mother-in-law, Patricia, orchestrated the evening like a symphony conductor with a drinking problem. Vivian's sister, Audrey, typically dominated the conversation with stories about her almost famous photography career. The contrast between the Hargroves and his own upbringing couldn't have been starker. Maxwell had grown up in a middle-class neighborhood where his father worked as an electrician and his mother as a nurse. They'd taught him the value of hard work and integrity. When they died in a car accident when he was 19, his grandfather had become his only family. Now at 35, Maxwell had built his construction company from nothing. He specialized in historical renovations, a skill his grandfather had nurtured. He met Vivian when her parents hired him to renovate their kitchen. Despite their different backgrounds, they'd connected immediately. 7 years of marriage later, he sometimes wondered if they were growing apart or if they'd ever truly been on the same path. He pocketed his phone and went inside to change for dinner. As he passed through the study, he noticed his grandfather's old safe was slightly ajar. That was odd. He'd been certain he'd locked it after retrieving the property deeds last week. Maxwell approached it cautiously and found it empty except for a small leather journal he hadn't noticed before. Inside, on the first page, was a handwritten note. "Max, if you're reading this, I'm gone. This journal contains truths I never spoke aloud. Some family secrets should remain buried, but others need to see daylight before they poison another generation. Trust your instincts about when to open these pages fully. You always had good judgment. Grandpa Roy." Maxwell flipped through the journal, seeing names he recognized, including several members of the Hargrove family. Curious, but pressed for time, he tucked the journal into his jacket pocket and headed for his truck. What Maxwell didn't know as he drove away was that this would be the last normal day of his life. The foundations were about to crack. Chapter 2. The Golden Facade. The Hargrove estate sprawled across 3 acres in Portland's West Hills, a monument to Theodore's success in commercial real estate. Maxwell parked his Ford F-150 beside luxury sedans and SUVs, feeling like the proverbial bull in a china shop. He'd learned to navigate these waters, but never felt at home in them. There he is, the working man. Theodore's booming voice greeted Maxwell as he entered. Theodore Hargrove III wore his 60 years well, silver hair perfectly coiffed, tailored suit impeccable. He clapped Maxwell on the shoulder with one hand while holding a whiskey in the other. "Sorry I'm late," Maxwell said. "I was finishing up at the house." Patricia Hargrove appeared, martini in hand. "Still fussing with that old place? Vivian tells me it needs a fortune in updates." "It's structurally sound," Maxwell replied. "The updates Vivian wants are aesthetic, not necessary." Patricia's smile tightened. "Well, you're the expert on construction matters." Vivian materialized beside him, stunning in a designer dress that probably cost more than most of his workers made in a month. She pecked his cheek. "You could have worn the shirt I bought you," she whispered. Before Maxwell could respond, Audrey burst into the room, trailing her fiancé, Damian Fletcher. Damian was a financial advisor with slicked-back hair and the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Maxwell had disliked him instantly when they'd met 6 months ago. "Everyone," Audrey announced. "Damian and I have set the date. June 15th. Champagne appeared as if by magic as the family celebrated. Amid the congratulations, Maxwell noticed something odd. The way Damien's hand lingered on Vivian's waist as he hugged her, the slight flush on her cheeks. "We found the perfect venue," Audrey continued. "The Rosewood Estate. It's absolutely divine, but the deposit is due next week." "Anything for my princess," Theodore beamed. "Though I must say, event prices these days are highway robbery." During dinner, Maxwell observed the dynamics around him with new eyes. He noticed how Vivian sat slightly angled toward Damien, how their eyes met briefly over wine glasses. He felt the weight of his grandfather's journal in his pocket and wondered what secrets it held about the Hargroves. When dessert arrived, Audrey cleared her throat. "There's one tiny issue with the wedding. The venue and the kind of celebration we envision. It's going to cost a bit more than we initially thought." "How much more?" Theodore asked. "About twice the budget," Damien said smoothly. "But Audrey deserves the best, doesn't she?" Theodore's expression darkened. "The market's been unpredictable lately. I'm not as liquid as I'd like to be." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Maxwell felt eyes turning toward him. "Maxwell," Patricia began sweetly, "I understand your grandfather's property must be worth quite a bit. All that acreage so close to the city." He stiffened. "It's not for sale. No one's suggesting selling," Theodore said quickly. "But perhaps a home equity loan? Just temporarily, to help with the wedding. You'd be helping family." Maxwell looked at Vivian, expecting support. Instead, she studied her plate. "We should discuss this at home," he said firmly. Later that night, as they drove home in silence, Maxwell felt the distance between them stretching into a chasm. When they arrived, Vivian finally spoke. "You embarrassed me tonight by not immediately agreeing to leverage my grandfather's house for your sister's wedding, by acting like you're not part of the family. It's just a house, Maxwell. A drafty, old house that needs work. It's my heritage," he said quietly. "Would you sell your grandmother's jewelry to pay for a party?" "That's different," she snapped. "How?" "Because," she faltered, "that jewelry is meant to be passed down. So is this house." Vivian's expression hardened. "To who, Maxwell? We don't have children. We're not going to have children if we keep putting it off. This house obsession of yours is just another excuse." The words struck deep. Their arguments about starting a family had increased recently. Maxwell wanted kids, but Vivian always had reasons to wait. Her career in interior design was taking off. The timing wasn't right. They needed more financial security despite their comfortable income. "This conversation is over," Maxwell said, walking toward the study. "Where are you going?" "To read." He closed the door behind him and pulled out his grandfather's journal, feeling that the answers to his current problems might somehow be contained in those pages from the past. Chapter 3. Fracture Lines. The next morning, Maxwell called in to his foreman and took the day off, something he rarely did. After Vivian left for her design studio, he settled in the study with his grandfather's journal and began to read in earnest. The entries dated back 30 years, detailing business dealings and personal observations. About halfway through, Maxwell found what felt like a punch to the gut. April 18, 1995. Ted Hargrove approached me about investing in his new development. "Something feels off. His numbers don't add up." When I questioned him, he became defensive, said I was being paranoid. Maybe I am, but I've seen too many good people lose everything by trusting the wrong smile. Maxwell flipped forward a few pages. June 3, 1995. I was right about Ted. He's using investor money to cover losses on his other properties. Classic Ponzi setup. Confronted him today. He offered me a special position to keep quiet. I refused. He threatened to ruin my reputation if I went public. Said no one would believe an old contractor over him. He's probably right. Maxwell's heart raced as he read on, discovering that his grandfather had gathered evidence against Theodore but never used it. December 12, 1995. Ted paid everyone back. Found a legitimate investor, or so he claims. I'm keeping the evidence anyway. Some leopards don't change their spots. They just hide in taller grass. The final entries were the most disturbing. May 15, 2018. Maxwell is marrying Vivian Hargrove next month. I haven't told him about Ted. Should I? Would it change anything? Love makes fools of the wisest men. I know. I've been one myself. January 3, 2023. Something's not right with Maxwell's marriage. He doesn't say it, but I see it in his eyes. The Hargroves are circling him like vultures. They want the property. Always have. Ted offered to buy it directly last week. When I refused, he mentioned Maxwell and Vivian's marriage in a way that felt like a threat. I'm recording this conversation and adding it to the rest. The journal mentioned a hidden compartment in the safe containing a USB drive. Maxwell found it, along with old photographs and documents that confirmed everything in the journal. As he processed this information, his phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. We need to talk about Vivian. Meridian Coffee, 2 p.m. Come alone. Sophia. Sophia Collins was Vivian's assistant at her design studio. They'd met at the company Christmas party last year. Maxwell had found her intelligent and straightforward, qualities the Hargroves typically deemed unrefined. At Meridian Coffee, Sophia was already waiting, nervously shredding a napkin. I'm probably crossing a line, she began without preamble. But I believe you deserve to know. Know what? Vivian is having an affair with Damien. Though he'd suspected it from their interactions at dinner, hearing it confirmed felt like being doused in ice water. I have proof, Sophia continued, sliding her phone across the table. Text messages, hotel receipts. It's been going on for at least 4 months. Why are you showing me this? Sophia reclaimed her phone. Because they're planning something. I overheard them talking. Vivian mentioned your grandfather's property, saying once they got control of it, they'd develop it into luxury condos. Damien said something about after Maxwell's out of the picture. It didn't sound like they were waiting for divorce. Why would you risk your job to tell me this? Sophia's expression hardened. My father lost everything investing with people like the Hargroves. People who think money and connections put them above consequences. After Sophia left, Maxwell sat for an hour, planning his next moves. When he finally returned home, he found Vivian waiting. Where have you been? She demanded. Mom called 3 times about the wedding funding. Maxwell studied his wife of 7 years, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. Let's discuss it tomorrow at your parents' house. I think I've come up with a solution that will work for everyone. Vivian's face lit up. Really? That's wonderful. I knew you'd understand how important this is. As she wrapped her arms around him, Maxwell felt nothing but cold determination. Yes, he said. I understand perfectly now. Chapter 4. Hidden Support Beams. Maxwell spent the night in his grandfather's study, methodically reviewing financial records and legal documents. He'd always been meticulous, a trait that had served him well in construction and would now serve him in deconstruction. First, he called his attorney, Bailey Winters, requesting an urgent meeting. You look like hell, Bailey observed when Maxwell arrived at her office at 7 a.m. With her no-nonsense demeanor and razor-sharp legal mind, Bailey had been his grandfather's attorney before becoming Maxwell's. I need divorce papers drawn up immediately, he said, sliding a folder across her desk. And I need your absolute discretion. Bailey's eyebrows rose as she reviewed the contents. Evidence of Vivian's affair, financial records, property deeds. There's enough here to ensure she gets nothing in the settlement. But why the rush? And why are you asking about Theodore Hargrove's mortgage history? Because I'm about to burn some bridges, and I need to know exactly how they're constructed first. After explaining his suspicions and his plan, Bailey looked concerned. This is high risk, Maxwell. The Hargroves have connections throughout Portland. So did my grandfather. He just chose not to use them. Bailey nodded slowly. What you're proposing skirts legal boundaries, but doesn't cross them, barely. I'll have everything ready by tomorrow morning. Maxwell's next stop was Riverstone Bank, where the manager, Harold Porter, greeted him warmly. Harold had been his grandfather's poker buddy for 30 years. Roy would be proud of what you're doing, Harold said after Maxwell explained part of his situation. The Hargroves have been playing with other people's money for too long. Armed with the information he needed, Maxwell made one final call to Nathaniel Reeves, a developer known for his environmental commitment and restoration projects. Years ago, Maxwell had helped Nathaniel restore a historical property when other contractors had claimed it was impossible. It's a substantial investment, Nathaniel cautioned after hearing Maxwell's proposal. Are you sure about this? I've never been more certain of anything. By evening, Maxwell had laid the groundwork. When he returned home, he behaved as if nothing had changed, telling Vivian he looked forward to dinner with her family the next night. That night, as Vivian slept, Maxwell accessed her phone using the password he'd seen her enter countless times. The text exchanges with Damien confirmed everything Sophia had told him and worse. They weren't just having an affair, they were actively planning to pressure him into leveraging the property. Once we get him to use the house as collateral, the rest is easy, Damien had written. Your father's contacts at the zoning commission already confirmed they'll approve the development plans. Are you sure we need to involve my parents? Vivian had replied. Maybe we could just convince Max directly. Your sister's wedding is the perfect cover. Besides, you said yourself he's too attached to that house to sell it outright. This way, we get what we want, and he thinks it was his idea. Maxwell replaced the phone exactly as he'd found it and went to the guest room, his mind clear for the first time in weeks. The man who lay down that night was not the same one who had stood on his grandfather's porch just days earlier. That man had believed in second chances. This one did not. Chapter 5. Load-bearing walls. The next morning, Maxwell visited his construction site, where his team was renovating a 1920s building downtown. His foreman, Luis Ortega, noticed his changed demeanor immediately. Everything okay, boss? You look like you're planning a demolition without permits. Maxwell managed a small smile. Something like that. He handed Luis a thick envelope. I need you to hold on to this. If anything happens to me, give it to Bailey Winters. Luis studied him with concern. Is there something I should know? Just insurance, Maxwell assured him. And I need you to take over operations for a few days. Can I count on you? Always have, always will, Luis replied, tucking the envelope into his jacket. After finalizing arrangements with Bailey, Maxwell returned home to prepare for dinner with the Hargroves. He showered and dressed carefully, selecting the suit he'd worn to his grandfather's funeral. As he adjusted his tie, Vivian entered the bedroom. You're dressed up, she observed. Important conversations deserve proper attention, he replied. Her eyes lit up. So you're really going to help with Audrey's wedding? Let's just say I've found a solution that addresses everyone's true priorities. At the Hargrove estate, Maxwell was uncharacteristically sociable, accepting Theodore's offer of expensive scotch and engaging Patricia in conversation about her garden renovations. When Damien and Audrey arrived, he noticed the subtle glance between Damien and Vivian but showed no reaction. During the appetizer course, Theodore broached the subject. Maxwell, Vivian mentioned you've had some thoughts about the wedding funding situation. I have, Maxwell replied. But before we discuss that, I'd like to propose a toast to family and the truths that bind us. He raised his glass, meeting each person's eyes briefly, to knowing exactly who we are and what we value. After they drank, Theodore leaned forward eagerly. So about the house. My grandfather's house is special to me, Maxwell began. It represents principles and heritage in a way I haven't properly articulated before. Patricia nodded sympathetically. We understand sentiment, dear, but sometimes practical matters must take precedence. Exactly right, Patricia. Practicality is essential. Maxwell smiled, which is why I've spent considerable time analyzing the situation. The family listened attentively as Maxwell spoke about his grandfather's legacy, the property's value, and family obligations. He noticed Damien checking his watch impatiently. The bottom line, Theodore finally interrupted, is will you take out a loan against the property to help fund the wedding? Maxwell set down his fork. The property represents approximately $2.3 million in equity. Audrey's wedding, even at the inflated prices Damien has arranged with his friends who own the venue, should cost no more than $300,000. Audrey gasped at his direct mention of the cost. Damien's jaw tightened. What I'm saying, Maxwell continued calmly, is that using the entire property as collateral would be excessive. However, I understand family obligations. Theodore's expression brightened. So you'll do it? Let me finish explaining my solution, Maxwell insisted. Tomorrow morning, I'm meeting with Riverstone Bank to arrange a different financing structure, one that honors both my grandfather's legacy and Audrey's special day. The rest of dinner proceeded with renewed warmth from the Hargroves. Only Maxwell noticed how Vivian and Damien avoided eye contact for the remainder of the evening. As they drove home, Vivian was jubilant. I knew you'd come around. Daddy's so impressed with how you're handling this. He said you're showing real business sense finally. High praise indeed, Maxwell replied dryly. By the way, I'll be leaving early tomorrow for the bank meeting. Don't wait up tomorrow night. I'll probably work late. Take all the time you need, Vivian said, squeezing his arm. You're doing the right thing. Yes, Maxwell thought. Finally, I am. Chapter 6. Controlled Demolition. The next morning, Maxwell left before dawn, setting his plan in motion. His first stop was Bailey's office to collect the prepared documents. Everything's in order, she confirmed. But are you absolutely certain about this approach? There's no going back. That's precisely the point, Maxwell replied. At Riverstone Bank, Harold was waiting with the paperwork Maxwell had requested. I've marked everything requiring your signature. Are you sure the Hargroves don't suspect anything? They're too focused on what they think they're gaining to notice what they're losing. By noon, Maxwell had visited the county records office, filed the necessary documents, and met with Nathaniel Reeves to finalize their arrangement. His phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from Vivian asking for updates, which he strategically ignored. At 3 p.m., he met with Sophia Collins at a notary public's office. You understand the implications of signing this? He asked as she reviewed the affidavit detailing what she had overheard between Vivian and Damien. Completely, she confirmed. Will it be enough? Combined with everything else? More than enough. By evening, Maxwell had completed every item on his list except one. He drove to his grandfather's house, and walked through each room slowly, remembering summers spent learning carpentry, winter evenings by the fire listening to stories of family perseverance. In the study, he opened the antique desk and retrieved a small wooden box his grandfather had carved decades ago. His phone rang. Theodore Hargrove. Maxwell, we expected to hear from you hours ago. How did the bank meeting go? Very productively, Maxwell replied. In fact, I've arranged something special for the family. Could everyone gather at your house tomorrow evening? I'll explain everything then. Splendid. Around 7. Perfect. After ending the call, Maxwell received a text from Damien. Heard you're arranging financing. Smart move. Let's grab lunch next week. I have investment opportunities perfect for someone joining the family business. Maxwell didn't respond. Instead, he sent a text to his attorney. Stage set. Proceeding as planned. Bailey's response was immediate. All documents filed and confirmed. Point of no return. Good luck. That night, Maxwell stayed at his grandfather's house, sleeping better than he had in months. In the morning, he visited his mother's grave, placing fresh flowers before updating her on his life, as he'd always done at important junctures. I think you and Dad would understand, he said quietly. Grandpa certainly would. He spent the afternoon finalizing details and preparing mentally for the evening ahead. At precisely 6:55 p.m., he arrived at the Hargrove estate, the wooden box under his arm. The family was gathered in the living room, champagne already poured. Theodore approached immediately, clapping him on the shoulder. There's our man of the hour. We were just discussing how to thank you properly. Maxwell noted that Damien was standing unusually close to Vivian. Audrey was scrolling through wedding venues on her tablet. Patricia was already on her second martini. Shall we toast before Maxwell shares his news? Theodore suggested, raising his glass. To family coming together in times of need. Everyone drank except Maxwell. He set his untouched champagne on the side table. I've given considerable thought to what family truly means, he began. To obligations, loyalty, and honesty. Theodore nodded encouragingly. Exactly the values the Hargroves stand for. Interesting you should say that, Maxwell replied. Because my investigation suggests otherwise. The room fell silent. Investigation? Vivian asked, her voice suddenly tense. Perhaps discovery is a better word, Maxwell continued. You see, when you asked me to leverage my grandfather's house for Audrey's wedding, you said something that stuck with me. You said, it's just an old house, but it's her special day. He turned to Vivian. And you stayed silent. I didn't think. Exactly. You didn't think I would look deeper. You didn't think I would find my grandfather's journal detailing Theodore's financial manipulations years ago. You didn't think I would discover your affair with Damien, or your plans to pressure me into using the house as collateral. Damien stepped forward. That's a serious accusation. With serious evidence, Maxwell cut him off. Hotel receipts, text messages, witness statements. Your conversation about getting me out of the picture once you had control of the property. Theodore's face had turned ashen. Now see here, Maxwell. No, you see, Maxwell interrupted, his voice calm but forceful. When you said it was just an old house, I realized something important. You were right. A look of confusion crossed their faces. It is just an old house. but it's my old house. And what it represents, integrity, hard work, family loyalty, those are values worth protecting. Maxwell opened the wooden box and removed a stack of papers. So I made some arrangements. What kind of arrangements? Theodore demanded. The kind that ensured justice, Maxwell replied, passing out the documents. You're right. Speaking of family. Chapter 7. The Blueprint of Vengeance. The silence in the Hargroves' living room was absolute as they examined the papers Maxwell had distributed. Theodore was the first to understand, his face contorting with rage. What the hell is this? He demanded, waving the document. That, Maxwell said calmly, is a copy of the mortgage I paid off this morning. Your mortgage. You see, Riverstone Bank was quite concerned when I showed them evidence of your recent financial difficulties. They were happy to sell the debt to me at a discount. Patricia gasped. That's impossible. Our house is paid for. Not exactly, Maxwell corrected. You refinanced 3 years ago to cover investment losses. Harold Porter provided me with the complete history. He turned to Theodore. You've been living beyond your means for years, using new investor money to cover old debts, just like you tried to do when my grandfather caught you decades ago. Theodore's face paled further. Roy promised he'd never. He never did, Maxwell confirmed. He protected you. I'm not so forgiving. Vivian approached Maxwell, her hand outstretched. Max, please, whatever you think is happening. What's happening is accountability, he interrupted, stepping away from her touch. He pulled another document from the box. This is a copy of the zoning variance request your father submitted last month for my grandfather's property, a property he doesn't own. The commissioner thought it was strange that Theodore Hargrove was applying to develop property owned by Maxwell Donahue, particularly since the application mentioned imminent ownership transfer. Damien cleared his throat. This is all a misunderstanding. Is it? Then perhaps you can explain these. Maxwell handed Damien printouts of text messages between him and Vivian. My personal favorite is where you discuss how to pressure me into using the house as collateral so you can ensure I default on the loan. Audrey, who had been silent until now, turned to her fiancé in shock. Damien? What is he talking about? Don't be naive, Audrey, Maxwell said gently. Ask yourself why a financial advisor would push for such an extravagant wedding when your family is already financially strained. The planning company, the venue, the catering, all owned by Damien's former college roommates. All charging premium prices with substantial kickbacks. Audrey's eyes widened as comprehension dawned. Maxwell continued his methodical distribution of documents. This one's particularly interesting, Theodore. It's the complaint I've filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission regarding your investment practices. That investigation will begin next week. Theodore lunged forward, but Maxwell sidestepped him easily. You ungrateful bastard. After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me? Maxwell asked. Besides attempt to steal my property, cover up your financial crimes, and encourage your daughter to betray her marriage vows. He turned to Vivian, whose face had drained of color. Which brings me to these. He removed the final documents from the box and placed them on the coffee table. Divorce papers, already filed with the court, and copies of the deed transfer I completed yesterday. Deed transfer, Vivian whispered. I've placed the property in an irrevocable trust. It can never be sold or developed. The house and 10 acres will become a historical landmark with public gardens dedicated to my grandparents. The remaining 30 acres will be a nature preserve. Patricia found her voice. You can't do this. We're family. Family doesn't conspire against family, Maxwell replied. But you're right about one thing. I have considered what family means. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. You can come in now. The front door opened, and Sophia Collins entered, followed by Detective Frank Morrison of the Portland Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. Detective Morrison is very interested in some documents my grandfather preserved, Maxwell explained, particularly those relating to Theodore's investment strategies. The detective nodded. Mr. Hargrove, we have some questions about investor complaints dating back several years. I'd appreciate if you'd come downtown to discuss them. Theodore's face contorted with rage. You think this ends here? Do you know who I am in this town? I know exactly who you are, Maxwell replied. That's the problem. As Detective Morrison led a protesting Theodore toward the door, Maxwell turned to Vivian. I'll have my things out of the house by tomorrow. Max, please, she begged. tears streaming down her face. "We can work this out. I made a mistake." "No," he corrected her. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. What you did was a calculated betrayal." He gestured to the divorce papers. "I'm not contesting any of our jointly acquired assets. You can keep the house, your car, your business. I want nothing from the life we built on lies." Damien, seeing the situation deteriorating, attempted to slide toward the door, but Maxwell blocked his path. "Not so fast. There's still the matter of the evidence Sophia provided about your involvement in Theodore's investment schemes. Detective Morrison will want to speak with you next." As Damien was escorted out, Audrey collapsed onto the sofa, her wedding plans literally crumbling before her eyes. "Was any of it real?" She asked no one in particular. "That's a question worth asking," Maxwell replied, his tone softening slightly. "But not one I can answer for you." He gathered the remaining documents and placed them back in the wooden box. As he turned to leave, Patricia called after him. "You'll regret this." No one crosses the Hargroves and walks away unscathed. Maxwell paused at the door. "Actually, Patricia, that's exactly what I'm doing. The difference between your family and mine is that mine taught me there are some things more valuable than money or status. Integrity is one of them." With that, he walked out of the Hargrove estate for the final time, leaving chaos erupting behind him. Chapter 8. Structural Integrity. The following weeks brought seismic changes to both families. The Hargroves' carefully constructed social facade crumbled under the weight of Theodore's arrest and the subsequent investigation into his business dealings. As investors came forward with complaints, the full extent of his financial manipulations became clear. Maxwell watched from a distance, focusing on rebuilding his own life. He moved into his grandfather's house permanently and threw himself into the restoration work he'd been planning for years. The property trust was officially established, ensuring it would remain protected long after he was gone. 3 weeks after the confrontation, Maxwell was replacing rotten boards on the porch when Luis arrived. "Thought you could use an extra pair of hands," his foreman offered. "Crew's worried about you being up here alone with power tools and revenge on your mind." Maxwell managed a small smile. The revenge part is done. They worked side by side for several hours before Luis broached the subject again. Word around town is Theodore Hargroves facing serious charges. His fancy lawyer couldn't get him out on bail. "The evidence was substantial," Maxwell replied. "My grandfather was thorough." "And Vivian?" Maxwell paused, hammer in mid-swing. "Filed a counterpetition to the divorce. She's contesting everything, claiming emotional distress and abandonment." Luis whistled low. "Bailey will handle her, no?" "Bailey's already shut down her first 2 attempts at claiming part of this property. The trust is ironclad." He resumed hammering with perhaps more force than necessary. "Vivian will walk away with her share of our marital assets, which is more than fair considering the circumstances." They worked in companionable silence until dusk. As Luis was leaving, he turned back. The guys were thinking, "It's been a while since we had a proper barbecue. Maybe this weekend?" "Up here." Maxwell considered the offer. "That would be good. Tell them to bring their families." After Luis left, Maxwell sat on the newly repaired porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Audrey called the design studio today. Canceled all wedding plans. Asked if we were hiring." He smiled slightly. Of all the Hargroves, Audrey had been the least involved in the deception, though not entirely innocent. Her complicity had been more about willful ignorance than active participation. Still, he felt no obligation to ease her path forward. Another text arrived, this one from Bailey. Damien took a plea deal, testifying against Theodore in exchange for reduced charges. Vivian's lawyer requested another continuance on divorce proceedings. Denied. The justice system was grinding forward, slowly but inexorably. Maxwell found a certain peace in that, though not joy. There was no triumph in watching a family destroy itself, even one that had attempted to destroy him. The next day brought an unexpected visitor. Harold Porter from Riverstone Bank drove up in his sensible sedan, carrying a folder and looking grave. "Thought you should hear this from me directly," Harold said after refusing Maxwell's offer of coffee. "Theodore Hargrove attempted suicide in custody last night. He's under medical watch now." Maxwell absorbed this news silently. "There's more," Harold continued. "His assets are being frozen as the investigation expands. Patricia's had to list their house for sale. Apparently, They were more leveraged than anyone realized. Are you suggesting I should feel remorse? Maxwell asked. Harold shook his head. Not remorse. Awareness. What you've set in motion has consequences beyond what you might have anticipated. I'm not saying they're undeserved, just extensive. After Harold left, Maxwell found himself opening his grandfather's journal again, rereading entries from decades earlier. One passage stood out. Justice without mercy becomes vengeance. Vengeance without boundaries becomes destruction. I've seen good men lose themselves in the pursuit of making others pay. The trick is remembering who you are when the debt is finally settled. That evening, Maxwell received a call from Detective Morrison. Thought you'd want to know? We found evidence linking Damian Fletcher to 3 other financial schemes similar to Theodore's. Different cities, different victims, same playbook. What about Vivian? Was she involved? No evidence she participated in the financial crimes, Morrison replied. The affair and the plan to pressure you about the property? Yes. The investment fraud? Appears she was adjacent but not involved. Maxwell thanked him for the update and ended the call, feeling oddly empty. The systematic dismantling of the Hargroves' lives continued without requiring his further input. The machinery of consequences operated independently now. The weekend brought Luis and the crew with their families for the promised barbecue. For the first time in months, laughter echoed across the property. Children explored the woods where Maxwell had played as a boy. The house, which had felt cavernous in its emptiness, was filled with voices and life. As evening approached, Luis found Maxwell sitting apart from the group, watching the gathering with a detached expression. You know what they say about revenge, boss, Luis commented, handing him a beer. That it's a dish best served cold? That you should dig 2 graves, one for your enemy and one for yourself. Maxwell considered this. I'm still standing. Are you? Luis challenged. You won the battle, but at what cost? I've known you 10 years, and this is the first time your crew has been to your home. That says something. Before Maxwell could respond, his phone rang, an unknown number. Mr. Donahue? This is Meridian Hospital. You're listed as Audrey Hargrove's emergency contact. There's been an incident. Chapter 9, Foundations Anew. Maxwell found Audrey in the emergency room, a bandage around her wrist, her eyes vacant. When she saw him, confusion crossed her face. Why are you here? She asked, her voice barely audible. The hospital called me. Apparently, you listed me as your emergency contact. She closed her eyes briefly. I must have given them your number by mistake. I don't have many options these days. The doctor informed Maxwell that Audrey had taken an overdose of sleeping pills, not enough to be lethal, but concerning nonetheless. They were keeping her under observation for 24 hours. You should go, Audrey said when they were alone again. I'm sure the last person you want to help is a Hargrove. Maxwell studied her. This woman who had been tangential to his life for years, always at the periphery of the family dynamics he'd navigated. What happened, Audrey? She laughed bitterly. Everything collapsed. Dad's in jail. Mom's drinking herself into oblivion. Our house is being sold to pay legal fees. Damian was apparently conning all of us. And my sister. She trailed off. Where's Vivian? Left the country. Paris, I think. Said she couldn't handle the scandal. Audrey's eyes filled with tears. I've been staying with a friend, but I wore out my welcome. Tonight, I just couldn't see a way forward. Against his better judgment, Maxwell made a decision. You'll stay at the guest house until you get back on your feet. Audrey stared at him in disbelief. Why would you help me? After what our family tried to do to you? Because I'm not your family, Maxwell replied simply. Which means I get to decide who I want to be in this situation. The next morning, Maxwell brought Audrey to the property. The small guest house behind the main residence had been his grandfather's workshop in later years. Recently renovated, it offered basic comforts and privacy. Ground rules, Maxwell stated as he showed her around. No contact with your parents or Vivian while you're here. No discussions about family finances or the legal cases. You get yourself into therapy and you find a job, any job. This is temporary, not charity. Audrey nodded, still bewildered by the turn of events. I don't understand why you're doing this. Neither do I, entirely, Maxwell admitted. Maybe I need to prove something to myself. In the weeks that followed, Audrey surprised him. She found work at a local garden center, began therapy sessions, and kept to herself. Occasionally, they shared a meal on the porch, their conversations carefully avoiding the past but gradually building something resembling mutual respect. One evening, as fall turned toward winter, Audrey brought up the forbidden topic. I received a letter from Vivian today. Maxwell tensed. I thought I was clear about. You were, Audrey interrupted. I'm not contacting her. I just thought you should know she's filing for bankruptcy in France. Apparently, she lost everything trying to maintain appearances after you divorced her. That's not my concern anymore. Audrey studied him. Do you ever regret how thoroughly you destroyed my family? Maxwell considered the question carefully. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that your family made choices that led to this outcome. But do I regret protecting what was mine and exposing the truth? No. Even knowing the casualties? Dad's suicide attempt, Mom's drinking, Vivian's financial ruin. Your father attempted suicide because he was facing consequences, not because I exposed his actions. The same applies to the rest. Maxwell's tone softened slightly. But I didn't anticipate your involvement in the fallout, and for that specific aspect, I am sorry. Audrey nodded, accepting this limited apology. For what it's worth, I believe you were justified. Not in the method, perhaps, but in the response to betrayal. She rose to leave. I found an apartment. I'll be moving out next week. Maxwell felt an unexpected twinge of, not regret, but acknowledgement. You're welcome to visit the gardens once they're established. 1 year to the day after the confrontation at the Hargrove estate, Maxwell stood on his porch watching as landscapers completed the public garden area. The Roy and Eleanor Donahue Memorial Gardens would open to the community the following spring. The trust was fully operational, with a board of directors that included Louise, Bailey, and surprisingly, Audrey, whose knowledge of horticulture had proven valuable. Theodore remained in prison, his sentence reduced due to health issues, but still substantial. Patricia had moved to Arizona to live with a distant cousin. Damien was serving time for his role in multiple financial schemes. Vivian had sent divorce papers from France, finally accepting the inevitable, though her accompanying letter full of justifications and explanations had gone unread. As for Maxwell, he had reconnected with an architect he'd collaborated with years earlier. Andrea Rodriguez had approached him about restoring historical buildings for community use, a project that aligned with his new focus. Their professional relationship was evolving into something more personal, though Maxwell proceeded with caution, the wounds of betrayal still healing. Luis joined him on the porch, handing him a beer. Place is looking good. Your grandfather would approve. Some days I still expect to find him out here with his coffee, telling me I'm using the wrong kind of weatherproofing on the railings. The old man knew his stuff, Luis agreed. Taught you well. Not just about building, from what I can see. Maxwell nodded, understanding the subtext. He tried to warn me about the Hargroves, in his way. I wasn't ready to hear it then. And now I understand what he meant about foundations. It's not enough to build something that looks solid. What matters is what's beneath the surface, the principles that hold everything up when storms come. Luis raised his bottle. To sturdy foundations. And to remembering who you are when the dust settles, Maxwell added, completing his grandfather's wisdom. As they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Maxwell felt a sense of completion. The revenge had been thorough and irrevocable. He had not forgiven, nor would he ever. But in the aftermath, he'd found something unexpected. Not just justice, but the chance to build something new on the ruins of betrayal. The house on Sentinel Hill stood as it always had, weathered but unbroken, a testament to those who understood that some legacies are built to endure, regardless of who tries to tear them down. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.